fear.
Can you feel it?
She is reaching.
Reaching for something.
She wants him. Quick,
For him.
save him.
Quick!
She was brave.
She's stupid.
She can see into you.
She a monster.
You are monster soul. She's like us. She is
Suffering like you.
We can see her.
She knows you.
When it comes to those single-player, third-person, over-the-shoulder, action-based, cinematic story-based games, I think Senua's Sacrifice or Hellblade 1 was one of my favorites. I liked how they tackled this story of someone dealing with grief, sorrow, and schizophrenia and put it against this backdrop of this Norse mythology type setting, with Hela and, all those Ymir totems and that kind of stuff. It was really an interesting and unique take, one of the more cerebral versions of these types of stories. Now, if you're someone that wanted more of an action game, it wasn't really that impressive. There were limited action scenes and you had limited options in terms of what you could do. You had one weapon and you basically worked with it throughout the game. Now, once that game ended, I was actually surprised to hear that they were making a second one. And I was very curious what it would be about. I did see the trailer, and earlier in the year when I did my benchmark, I did try out the opening section, but I didn't go any further than that. So this week, I finally picked the game up and I played through the rest of it. It's not very long. It can mostly be beaten in a single sitting because it's under 6 hours long. Once the game ended, I have to admit I was in a bit of shock by how they chose to end it. I don't even know if they chose to... Okay, let me not get ahead of myself. Let's start with the basics. What did I expect out of Senua's Saga? It's the same thing I expect out of basically any sequel, right, to any game. There are a few, of course, finer points within there. There's a bit of nuance to each of these points, but in general, this is what I expect out of any sequel. I expect expanded gameplay. Whatever the gameplay was of the original, I expect that to be maintained and then expanded, a few more options. If it was a stealth game, I expect a bit more stealth options. I expect a bit better routes, better enemy AI. If it's a combat game, I expect more options, more weapons. Many games are able to do this in sequels. Secondly, I expect a better story than the original game. I expect new characters. I expect better graphics. Not always. If it looks fine, I don't mind. If you told me that Alan Wake 3 is going to look like Alan Wake 2, hey, I'm not complaining, right? That game looks amazing. If the next game is not changing the graphics, who's really going to complain, right? I expect new locations to be added to the game. Unless it's the type of game where changing location doesn't make sense, like FIFA or like a sports game. I expect some expansion of the lore of the world if it's something like that is fictional. And I think in general, that is what I would say I expect from any sequel.
Explain.
What is happening?
Tiger.
Who is she?
So when the volcano erupted, it tore open the wall between this world
Now
and
this world
Jotunheim.
suffers too.
The giants came flooding from the east, killing and eating
More
whomever
of
they
them
could lay their
terrifying
hands on.
giants.
Now some of us, we hide.
You have to fight, not
Make
hide.
defenses, struggle on.
Now, Senua Saga only does a few of these things. It does new locations, it does better graphics, and it does new characters. But that's basically it. The rest, it is unable to deliver. It almost does only the cinematic things. So let's start with what I like about the game. The first thing, as I've already said, is the graphics and the presentation. I think this might be just about the most beautiful game I have ever seen. It is so detailed in terms of fidelity, like, games that look realistic. I think this might be the best one. And I have played The Last of Us 2, I've played Final Fantasy 16, I've played Alan Wake 2, Like, I've played some really good looking games with lots of fidelity, and I think of all of them, this might be the one that looks the best when you combine both its visual presentation of the environment and the characters' motion capture and acting. I think they do an excellent job with this game. There's a lot of like facial twitches to Senua, and I think it looks really cool. Now, still along that same line, there are these long shots that the game does during certain action sequences. This is something that certain directors, action directors, like to play around with, where they have this long shot that sticks to one character, usually the main character. We saw it like in the Battle of the Bastards in Game of Thrones season 8. Wait, was it season 7? Season 7, where the camera sort of sticks with Jon Snow, and then characters come in and off camera in order to create this chaotic looking fight. Senua has a few of these types of shots, and I think they're really cool. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I don't like those kinds of sequences. I think it's very visually interesting to look at. Although sometimes while it's happening, I'm laughing, wondering what happens to that character once they go off screen. The logistics of what's going on in these fights is a bit tricky. Now, still, again, segueing from the point of fights, there are certain set-piece fights within this game. Senua goes up against giants in this game. Those are the primary enemy. And although, unfortunately, there are only 3, as I'll talk about in the negatives, these set pieces are really fantastic, especially the first one against the female giant. It has this music that's matching with it while you're running from point to point, and whenever there's this flash of this lava, whenever there's this flash of this red light, it like times itself with the music. Now, technically, there isn't much actually going on there. You're just pressing forward. But again, from a visual perspective and an audio perspective, it's quite an experience. And I really liked how it looked and sounded. Now, that's basically everything that's positive about this game. The rest of it I did not like. I feel like everything I've said was judging the game on a visual level. Unfortunately, I think it fails in every other aspect. Now, this game has issues both as a sequel and as its own game. As a sequel, I think it's inferior to Senua's Sacrifice in basically every way. And a lot of this, unfortunately, feels deliberate. Let's start with the most obvious one. It's the gameplay itself. The gameplay in Senua's Sacrifice was a bit simple. It was a bit simplistic. You had a sword, you did some parries, you did some dodges, and then you could, parry enemies, or you could do heavy and light attacks. What I thought would happen with the sequel is that they would expand this. Either give you more options with the sword in terms of what you can do, or give you like another weapon, maybe an axe, something that can allow Senua to do something different in her combat. But none of that happens. Instead, they stripped it down, which is a very weird direction to go with combat in a game. They sort of stripped it down, and now not only do you never fight multiple enemies, you strictly fight one at a time, and every time that you're fighting them, you sort of have to, you just have to block or just dodge an attack, and that's it. There is this item that you're given that can slow time down in order just to make the fights go faster. But to me, that feels more like an answer to certain very annoying enemies in this game. There are enemies that can basically stun lock you or create a situation where you can't really attack. So that item seems like it's designed just to make those fights go quicker, or those enemies that take really long to defeat. That item basically will help you to get through them much faster. And also, in general, the combat is so mindless this time round. I won't lie, a lot of the times during the combat sections, I would actually zone out. I would end up taking a lot of damage, not because like I can't dodge it or anything, but just because I would just mentally zone out, and then I would get hit. And then I would sort of try to get back into the flow of things, but I'll just keep taking hits. And then I'll just have to use the item and just get through the fight and move on to the next thing. It's genuinely not fun. Like, I'll be honest, it also feels very sluggish for some reason. A lot of the time you'll get hit even when you think you're going to land and attack yourself. So that's the gameplay sections. I feel like they, rather than expand it and make it a bit more engaging, they sort of dumbed it down and really focused on the cinematic aspect instead of making the combat a bit more fun. Now, on this same aspect of gameplay, the same goes for the puzzles. In the original game, you had to look for shapes that match other shapes, and this was standard for this particular game, and they still maintain the same thing here, except now, just like with the other one, they again dumbed it down even further. Now you don't have to look for the shapes, you can see them on the map, because they have, not on the map, rather on the you can see them right in the open space while you're moving, because they'll have like these runic symbols that are glowing in the air. So you don't even have to think about what you're looking for. You just look for where the runes are, walk up to there, and then just press the focus button, and that's it. So the puzzles are basically the little nuance that they had to them, which was already pretty simple, has been all but removed. And then the third and final aspect to that is the movement. I honestly wish they'd improved it. I still think Senua moves way too slowly. I had this problem in the first game, I have it here as well. The next aspect is the story. The story is way weaker this time. The original game had a very personal tale about, dedication to one's lover, going basically literally to hell and back to try and save them. That aspect is completely gone this time, and Senua is basically a hero now, like a stereotypical hero, just going off to save her village. Her fellow villagers are captured off screen before this game starts, and they've been taken by a group of slavers. And essentially, she arrives onto this island to basically look for them and try and get them back. And that's essentially the quest that she's going on. It's just not a very compelling story compared to the original. Now, a compelling story can be helped by characters, interesting side characters. Most of the characters in this game are one-dimensional. Unfortunately, they don't do anything interesting or have a very lasting impact with them, unfortunately. The only positive I can say about them is that they're very well motion captured and voice acted, just like everything else. The third and final thing that I'll say about Senua Saga as a sequel is the call to arms of this franchise, which is the voices within Senua's head. These were always the appeal to this franchise, right? The thing that made it unique. If somebody asks you what's unique about Hellblade that makes it different from any other random action game, it's the voices in Senua's head. Now, these were extremely intriguing in the first game. They felt threatening, they felt overbearing. It almost felt like they are constantly like giving you wrong advice, good advice, mocking you. In this game, they feel like Twitch chat. They're just pointing out obvious things that whoever is looking at this, whoever is watching the gameplay can already see.
She's He wants you. Breathe, God. Alone again. Some things can only be done alone.
She haunts this
They
land
have lost
from here to
everything.
my village in Red Hills.
If we go with him, she will find us. We will find her.
Glad you're here to tell us these things.
And they keep also pointing out emotions that are not shown on screen, I guess in order to sort of add it. They're almost like a narrator, and yet the game has its own narrator, but the voices are also acting as narrators to what's happening on screen. They're just far, far, far less impactful this time round. It's unfortunate that they are sort of downgraded in their role, and honestly, the game could have done without them this time. It's unfortunate that they're just so much less impactful. And I think there is less of them this time. There's just two. There's one on the left and one on the right, and that's it. It doesn't feel like there's more than two this time round. I guess the issue here with this being a sequel is that the Senua's journey with these voices was resolved by the end of the first game. So bringing them back this time, they really had to think through what they are going to do this time, and I really don't think they contribute much. They are really just annoying. Now, as its own game, separate from the first one, this game also has more issues. One, it has pretty weak storytelling, as I've mentioned. It's just a basic hero story, and unfortunately, it's not one that's handled very well. Senua's problem this time is that she kind of faces some self-doubt at a few moments, but oh my god, the way this is handled is hilarious. Almost every time that she undergoes some kind of doubt, she just immediately gaslights herself to do better. I'm not kidding. She faces some kind of problem, usually the screen will stop, like the motion will stop, and then she'll have like an internal mental battle where either her dad's shadow or the Furies or somebody will tell her, you can't do this, you're responsible for a lot of death, or you're not going to be able to do this and move forward. And then she'll basically just say, no, I got this.
Senua, would you give your life for these outsiders?
In my darkest hour, it was an outsider who saved
You thought you got away.
No,
You thought you left it behind in hell.
me. It's a promise. Not a prison.
Keep it close.
don't let the past stop you.
Don't let it drag you down.
Your destiny awaits. Look up.
Yes,
All the suffering
right there.
you have brought this on them,
He's right.
have damned them all.
How will you keep going now?
How will you live with yourself?
With this heaviness?
Yes, feel it.
Let it wear you down.
Feel it, Senua.
I can feel it.
You deserve to feel it.
You still want my help.
You can't help her.
You are more than what your father thinks.
You are nothing.
Take her hand.
Trust her. You can do this together.
And then it's resolved, and then she just moves forward. And that's the end of that. I'm like, what? Was this because of time that the game has to be short? It's so expensive that you can't linger on these points. Every struggle that Senua faces is resolved immediately. And then she just moves on and it doesn't come back again. It is very, very weak writing. Strangely enough, despite the fact that this is like the drama is resolved very quickly, there is so much time wasting in this game. It manages to achieve that weird paradox where it simultaneously feels too short and too long. When you look at the length of the game, it's very short, 6 hours roughly. But when you look at the amount of time, the amount of sections within the game that feel long, there is, I think the worst case of all is a section within the middle where you're looking for these characters called the hidden ones, and you're moving through a cave system and you're holding a torch, and you're, for the most part during this section, you're just pressing forward, following instructions and trying to get to this group. This section feels like it went on for 5 hours. Now it didn't, It's actually really short in the grand scheme of things when compared with other AAA games, but it doesn't feel short. It feels extremely long. I'll put it this way. Metaphor Fantasio is a game that I spent over 100 hours in, and it did not start to feel old. It did not start to feel like it's dragging until about, 80 hours in. This game is only 6 hours long, and by the third hour, it already feels like it's dragging its feet. So many sections feel like they go on way longer than they should, and it's more of just a visual thing. It's more of an experience thing. A lot of the time, you're just pressing forward. The puzzles are not very engaging. The game is super quiet. Senua walks slowly, so it just feels like you're just dragging your feet. Nothing is happening, and it just goes on forever. It's not actually that long, it just feels that way, which I think is bad for the experience that the player, goes through. Senua also has certain things that she deals with, like not wanting to be like her father, having some kind of inner darkness within herself, being like a cause of death, like, someone that spreads death wherever she goes. A lot of this stuff doesn't go anywhere. It's just the stuff that the game sort of muses with, and because of the way that it's written, with this extremely poetic type, deep introspective type of writing that they try to do, it really goes nowhere a lot of the time. The best writing, I think, in the game is it happens with the Titans. Every time you get to them, because of the nature of the type of game that this is, it's very cerebral. It's not You're not going to have like a big kaiju fight like in Attack on Titan. It's going to be something that's based on trauma or regret or something. That's just how this franchise works. And so when you get there, they each have some kind of battle that they're dealing with. You first learn about them, and then you have to sort of get into their mind. There'll be like a little bit of an action sequence at first, because it seems to be mandated that there has to be an action sequence first. But then eventually it will transition into like a mental game between you and the Titan. And then eventually Senua sort of absolves them of whatever their trauma is. Now, those particular traumas, those scenes, not the overall way that the story is handled, but just those scenes in particular, those I felt were pretty nice. But it's mostly, again, the music, the actors, and the presentation that's sort of doing the work, not so much the writing itself. But those scenes I actually enjoyed, and I did like experiencing, so I did appreciate those ones. In the end, the final thing that I will say is the ending feels like it comes the hell out of nowhere. First of all, the final reveal, like the final twist at the end with the last villain, it's terrible. It's bad. It's the lamest thing you could possibly reveal about the Titans at the end. I'm not going to spoil it here. I know the game's been out for a long time. I'm still not sure if it's something I should spoil. These kinds of games are really just about the story. So if someone tells you, they've basically killed it. I'm going to assume that that's the right thing to do. I'm not so sure. I'm just going to say the final reveal is lame. It is like the laziest thing you could possibly do with these Titans. And once that final battle is done, the game just sort of ends. Not that I'm not saying that it should have had an extra chapter or something, even though I feel like there is one or two chapters missing within this game. The game literally just stops. As soon as you finish the final fight, the game just stops. And it felt like there was at least an epilogue scene that should have been there, at least to sort of wrap up, Senua's relationships with the new characters, and at least set up what happens. At least like say something before the game ends, but it literally just abruptly stops right there. It almost feels like they ran out of money or they ran out of time, and they just could not do anymore, and they just had to end the game. Once that happened, I was genuinely stunned, and I have to admit that probably colored a lot of my thoughts about the game, but I was genuinely stunned because it finally felt like it started to go somewhere. And the sad thing is, to me, it feels like it it feels like it was almost like a Senua 1.5. I have the same feeling about this game that I did towards Alan Wake 2, where it doesn't feel like the genuine sequel. It feels like it's setting up that sequel, and that is now going to be the next game, and that this one, nothing much really happened. It's just sort of a transition phase. I'm sure that's not how the creators see it. They probably believe they put out a full sequel, but as someone that was interested in seeing the protagonist's story advance, that didn't happen in this game. Just like in Alan Wake 2, I feel like Alan Wake's story didn't advance. It was more about Saga than anybody else, and yeah, so that is how I feel about Senua's Saga. It's pretty disappointing, I'll be honest. I was hoping that it would be like one of those gut punch stories, but it's not. I actually, when the game was over, I was asking myself at many points. This was something some people asked about the first one, but this second one really brings it to the forefront. It's like, did this actually need to be a game? This could have just been released as a tech demo, similarly to what happened with Astrobot, the first, not Astrobot, Astro's Playroom, the original one for PlayStation 5. That kind of thing where it's just a tech demo to just show how the technology works. Because as far as being an actual game of its own, I don't know. Like if you're selling this at $50, the same price as what was that other game that came out last year? A Plague Tale Requiem, right? If this game costs the same as a Plague Tale Requiem at $50 each, but Requiem does everything that you want out of a sequel. All the items I mentioned before, that game manages to move every single one of them forward. So if someone tells you that and these are both the same price, I mean, come on. It's not really, it's very difficult to justify picking this one up. And I think that's part of why it didn't really perform well. I've been looking into the player numbers. It looks like it didn't perform very well. So I don't know if we'll be seeing another installation of Hellblade. But if we do, I hope that this time they give it a lot more effort in other areas other than just making it look technically amazing. All right, that's it for this session. Thanks for listening if you made it this far.